Let's start with a sentence that's just chilling. In 1964, 38 people reportedly witnessed a murder, and no one intervened. Just those two facts, side by side, sent absolute shockwaves across America. They kicked off a huge psychological investigation into a really uncomfortable question. What happens to us in a crowd? And why, when someone desperately needs help, do so many of us just do nothing? You see, this was never just about one awful crime. It was like pulling back a curtain on this invisible force that can shape our decisions in critical moments. So today, we're going to dive deep and unravel the science behind one of the most fascinating and, frankly, unsettling ideas in psychology, the bystander effect. And our story really kicks off with a name that, for many, has become the textbook example of this effect: Kitty Genovese. Her murder in New York City back in 1964 wasn't just another crime story. It became this modern-day parable about what happens when we all just mind our own business. This quote from the New York Times is what really lit the fuse. I mean, it paints a terrifying picture, doesn't it? A group of respectable, law-abiding citizens just watching. It wasn't just reporting on a murder, it felt like an accusation against everyone. And you can bet that people all over the country were reading this and asking themselves that one awful question: what would I have done? But here's where the story takes a twist. Because years later, as journalists and historians dug deeper, they found that the original story wasn't quite right. It wasn't like 38 people had front row seats to the whole thing. The attacks happened in different spots. People heard things, maybe saw a glimpse of something, but they were confused. They didn't have the full picture. Okay, so you might be thinking, if the story was blown out of proportion, why are we even talking about it? Well, because even with all the confusion and the messed up reporting, that fundamental, disturbing question was still hanging in the air. Why didn't anyone manage to do something that stopped it? The myth, it turns out, was pointing to a very real and very powerful truth about how we behave. And that question completely fascinated two psychologists, Darley and Bibb. They just weren't buying the simple explanation that people were apathetic or just didn't care. They had a hunch that something else, some kind of powerful situational force, was at play. So in 1968, they came up with some really clever experiments to figure out what was really going on. So let's walk through their most famous study. I want you to imagine you're the one in the experiment. You're just sitting in a room filling out some forms. Pretty boring. But then you notice smoke, and it starts pouring into the room from a vent. Now, if you're all alone, what do? Okay, but what if you're in that exact same room, but there are two other people with you, and they don't even look up? They just keep filling out their forms like nothing is happening. Well, the results were just mind-blowing. When a person was alone in the room, 75%, 3/4 of them, got up and reported the smoke right away. Makes sense. But look what happens when you add two other regular people into the room. The number plummets to just 38%. And now for the real kicker, when the participant was in the room with two actors who were specifically told to ignore the smoke, only 10%, a measly 1 out of 10 people, ever reported the emergency. The evidence was just undeniable. This wasn't about being a good person or a bad person. The simple fact that other people were in the room totally changed how a person reacted. Darley and Latané had found the engine behind the bystander effect, and they gave it a name: diffusion of responsibility. So, what is it about having other people around that can just freeze us in our tracks? Why does that feeling of I have to do something seem to just dissolve into thin air when we're in a group? Here's the best way to think about it. Imagine responsibility is a pie. If you're the only person who sees an emergency, you get 100% of that pie. It's all on you. But if there are, say, 10 other people there, suddenly you feel like you've only got a small slice. The weight of it feels so much lighter, and that urgent need to act gets spread so thin that it practically disappears. And it's actually a whole bunch of things happening in our brains at once. First, we look around to see how others are reacting. If no one else is panicking, we think, maybe this isn't a big deal. We also tend to assume someone else is better suited to help. You know, a doctor or a police officer, anyone but us. Or we just figure, well, somebody must have already called for help. And then there's the big one: we're terrified of looking stupid. No one wants to be the person who makes a scene over nothing. But hang on, the story doesn't stop there. It turns out the number of people around isn't the only thing that can turn us into bystanders. there's another incredibly powerful force that can completely override our good intentions, and, you guessed it, another classic experiment brought it to light. So in 1973, Darley partnered up with another researcher, Daniel Batson, for what we now call the Good Samaritan experiment. This time, they wanted to test a totally different kind of pressure, the simple pressure of being in a hurry. So let's just put these two landmark studies side by side. You've got the smoke-filled room, where the key factor is the number of witnesses. Then you've got the Good Samaritan study, where the key factor is how much of a rush someone is in. And incredibly, they both pointed to the same shocking conclusion: these outside pressures have a massive impact on our willingness to help. And here is the single most astounding part of the Good Samaritan study. The people they tested were seminary students. Yep, people training to be priests and ministers. And the irony is almost painful. Some were literally on their way to give a sermon about the parable of the Good Samaritan. And yet, if they were told they were running late, only 10% of them, 1 out of 10, stopped to help a man who was slumped over and groaning in an alley. Some of them literally stepped right over him to get to their lecture on time. So what's the big, humbling takeaway from all this? It's that we all like to believe we're good people, that our moral compass guides our actions. But what this research shows, pretty powerfully, is that our immediate situation, things we barely even notice, like who's standing next to us or how late we are, can have way more power over what we do than our deeply held beliefs. Now, I know that can sound pretty bleak, like we're all just puppets on a string, but it's actually the opposite. It's incredibly empowering, because the absolute best way to fight the bystander effect is to just be aware that it's a real thing. Understanding these mental traps, that's the first step to not falling into them. Once you can name it, you can choose to defy it. So the next time you're in a situation and something feels off, you can be the one to break that spell of silence. You can be the one who asks, "Hey, are you okay?" You can be the one who decides to make the call instead of assuming someone else will. Because now you know the psychology behind inaction. You know the effect is real. The only question is, what will you do with that knowledge?